Hey everybody, today I'm going to do some vocal analysis on four really great singers and their distortion. It's not going to be too lengthy and too big of concert footage, fucking all this different stuff, but I want to break down some fundamentals of distortion, some fundamentals of what people are doing and what they're not doing, and maybe how to do some of these things, how to get into the pocket of some of these things. So if that's something that interests you, then join me and we're going to chat about it. All right, so I've pulled up four different videos. I have not listened to them. I think I knew about one of them from just the thumbnail, but I just, like I said, I want to talk about distortion a little bit, and it's one of the main things that people reach out to me for as a vocal teacher, and other than mixed voice and things like that. But it can be very tricky. It can be very elusive. It can be difficult to find. And really quickly to tell you about my experience with it, it's always been the hardest thing for me to really get a good handle on and to consistently do well. It was never something that was hurting my voice or blowing my voice out. I've actually never had trouble with that, thankfully. But it could be difficult for me to get into certain pockets and add it and, consistently add it night after night or song after song, things like that. It's definitely a thing that can put you in a precarious place where sometimes you don't want to go too heavy, or sometimes you want to back off a little bit because you want to save. In short, it's a physically difficult thing sometimes, and we're going to get into that in how it's physically difficult. But yeah, let's listen to some of these clips of people that were fucking great at it. And lastly, I'll say this too: when you're writing your own songs and you're creating your own parts, it can be a lot easier to consistently hit things the way that you know how to hit them, the way that your voice likes to hit them. But if you're some dickhead like me that's constantly singing other people's stuff and then going out and performing other people's songs, like a cover band and things, it definitely could be a lot more difficult, because then you're kind of trying to enunciate and distort the way that they do. And it's one thing to try to sound like somebody, but it's definitely another thing to try to sound like somebody, enunciate somebody like somebody, match somebody's range, and then match somebody's vocal distortion, tone, and it's just a lot of shit to put onto the voice that it doesn't always like doing. So either way, it's all a learning experience and it's fun. So I have not sang yet today. I have not warmed up or anything, so I'll lay back a little bit, but let's start off here. So one of the good things about acoustic shows like this, like the Alice in Chains acoustic, is that you can really hear what people are doing. It's not hidden behind, a wall of compression and all this kind of stuff. You can really kind of see what's going on. So I pulled up this song. I don't really know where I am, but let's jump in here. Everybody knows this was an awesome performance, and yeah. To snuff the rooster. So, one of the things I'm always talking about with vocal distortion, and the reason I wanted to pull this clip up, is because I wanted to show again how distortion can be found as a matter of placement. It's not this pick up your fucking desk and try to lift weights and push down like you're gonna shit your pants. It doesn't have to be all of those things. It definitely enters into that realm in certain ways, especially as you get closer and closer or above your bridge. Then we enter into more of the kind of things. But for right now, if you're watching the screen with me, you can see that Layne, at first, when he goes, yeah, and he's hitting the first part, he's not doing any work at all. He's actually finding it as a matter of placement. So we'll go back and I'll try to find this here for you again. And the note is a D sharp 4. Yeah, they come to snuff the rooster. So now, as a matter of trying to understand placement, nasality, and somebody's voice, people might just be like, that's how Layne sang. That's the way he sounded. Well, no, he's moving back and purposefully going into that pocket right there, and that's a matter of distortional placement. So he's going, yeah. He's going, you see his entire mouth going, ah. He's basically making an ah and he's moving towards nasal. So he's moving towards the back upper palate where your uvula hangs down, which is where upper distortion is created. Now, as I've talked about this before, I don't want to get into all the pieces of this, but we have vocal cord distortion, which is basically vocal fry, like that. We have above, which is false chord, up there, right above the vocal cords. And then we have upper distortion, that up there. So right here, if we position ourselves with something like UNG, and we become very nasal, then if we start to add a little bit more to that, I already started picking just from that vowel and just from keeping myself back. I just started getting just a little bit of upper distortion just from that. I'll do it one more time for you. So let's do what he did right here. Time to snuff the rooster. Time to snuff the rooster. Helps to be warmed up. But you can see just by mimicking that kind of sound, we start moving into the back and getting distortion. Now, let's talk about when it gets a little bit harder. You can tell that he's pretty much right close to his bridge in the second part, and that's when shit needs to physically change a little bit. Yeah, here come the rooster. Yeah. So he's sitting perfectly in that pocket. So that is F4. If you're a baritone like me, my bridge is F sharp 4. That's where it's consistently been for many, many years, and that's where I'm perfectly at that threshold of So he might have had a little bit of a higher voice. I can't necessarily tell, but you can tell right there he's at this really nice pocket of, okay, this might work or this might not, or some things have to change. So without getting into all that shit, at that point, I'm going to have to start lowering my larynx and changing my vowel or changing a couple things. Now, again, he's saying, here they come to snuff the rooster. Yeah. And yeah works really well for this stuff. Metallica, fucking bands. I was on tour one time, and the one band, every other word he kept throwing in, everything was yeah, like this, because yeah processes itself through that E. Yeah. And it pushes us up into that palate. Anyway, saying yeah like that puts us into that position, and it's happening right here. Yeah. So if I come up to here, I have to start correcting my voice and pushing my larynx down. And that's a whole other set of things that I've talked about plenty of other times. But like I said, in terms of getting heavier or having to really start supporting and moving into those directions, first it's and that's about as far as I can go in terms of just placement before I have to actually start using other things. Right there, you saw me tilt my head down and then start engaging and pulling my larynx down. If you couldn't, I'll do it again. So that's normal. I'm going, and I'm preparing myself to go higher by starting to yawn. So if you're using nasality, you're getting used to nasality, you can also be still raising the larynx like this, and you'll hear that space in the back of the throat start clamping down. You can actually hear it in his voice here a little bit too, because he's close to his bridge. That gap in there pushed up and made it sound more bright and distortional, but also if he went maybe a note or two higher, it might not work anymore, and he'd have to start doing a couple of things I'm talking about. You are talking about. Let's go to the next one. Get out of my way. All right. I just pulled up a random Smashing Pumpkins track from when he sang distortionally. I don't know if he does anymore. Some of my favorite singers don't seem to use distortion anymore. They might have lost it. Maynard from Tool lost it, but then he seems to have gotten some of it back now recently. Billy Corgan, Serge Tankian from System of a Down. I don't think he screams or anything anymore from what I've heard. Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails. Some of the most recent shows I've seen with him, completely clean. So it's a shitty thing. People's voices change. And like I said, this is one of more of the extreme things that people have to do. If you are trying to find these things too, same with mixed voice. And I try to tell people this, but everybody's trying to combine all of these things together and just have like one seamless, amazing voice. And I know that's the end goal, but when you're learning, it's much more easy to segment and faction these things out as separate pieces and start to practice them or learn them as separate pieces, and then start to try to combine them with the more normal or regular voice. Like, for example, really quick, if you are trying to learn mixed voice, you can tell that I'm really using a different space in my throat, in my head. I'm literally teetering back and forth between two different muscle groups for the most part. Same with distortion in some ways. It's not that I always want to be able to just ramp, and slowly go, just push into distortion. In some ways, you're probably going to find it more as this other thing. And then you're like, how the fuck do I make that thing, this thing, and all that kind of stuff. Process it like that, practice it like that, try to find it like that. It's not always going to come from your just basic default, I sing like this, sang like this for so long, how do I take this? And then, it's a whole other thing in some ways. So I don't know where I am in this video. Let's see what old Billy Corgan's up to. And I'll do this again. We perfectly just heard exactly what I was just explaining again. We saw a couple of those where he was lowering the larynx and pushing backwards, and you see his body change. And then you see some of the other ones where he's got his head out and he's just kind of distorting as a matter of placement. Let's watch that one more time. No. Guess what note it is? It's an F4. So pretty much right again at the baritone bridge. So right there again, it could be no. It could almost be there, but it also has to kind of probably no, and move backwards and be in that more compressed place. Show. Right there, he was pretty much at the precipice of go, but finding it from placement and then pulling back. I hope some of this is making a little bit of sense. We hear a little bit here too that he's kind of just thrashing his voice. I'm sure it's kind of okay though. He's not being insanely loud, which is kind of a whole other part of this too, which I might get into if I can. But we hear that he's super nasal. Everybody knows that about him. If you don't know that about him, you should know it now. Billy Corgan was always very nasal. Nasality helps you to pull in a healthier distortion. And the reason being, again, the further everything we get, the further we get away from our vocal cords and process it up higher, the healthier it's going to be. If we do false chord distortion, like the next person I'm going to pull up more, it tends to get closer to the vocal cords and heat up and things swell because they're closer together, and it's just harder on the voice. Same with people that are doing lower screams and they want to sound like fucking monsters, whatever. It's just harder on the voice. That's all. But having that kind of weed whacker, Kurt Cobain, Billy Corgan, this thing is much easier kind of to do. It's harder to find, but it's easier on the voice. So, but anyway, same kind of stuff. Despite all my rage, I am still just a rat in a cage. If I was warmed up, it might be a little bit brighter. But then you hear him breaking through a little bit with vocal fry and rah, 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 and you hear him kind of starting to scream a little bit. And he screams later in this song too. But anyway, that's just a matter of a little bit of that vocal fry from just being a little bit heavier and using a tiny bit more air while you're compressed, coming through. Anyway, let's move on to Metallica. So I think I pulled up Enter Sandman. This is later. So his voice has been very interesting. I had to try to sing for this cover song thing not that long ago. What the fuck was it? It was an old Metallica song, and dude, it was absolutely so brutal to sing. He was singing up to probably almost like a B up here, perfectly chesty and distorted. And I have no idea how he was able to do that stuff. Then you pull it up live and you're like, let's see if he can do this. Yep, perfectly, amazingly live. One of the best, like distorted, heavy, masculine voices I've ever heard back in the day. And then the Black Album, his voice kind of changed and he blew himself out and he couldn't do that stuff anymore. And I think his voice was kind of lowering and maybe just, you know, a little taxed from all the crazy shit they were doing, drinking, smoking, God knows what else. Anyway, then he started staying more in a lower pocket, which we all know the James Hetfield, down here. And then now it seems maybe he's taking some vocal lessons and stuff, and he's starting to pull in upper here now again, and he's able to hit higher notes. They just released a new album, Lux Eterno, and he's able to keep open and do a lot of really great stuff. So in terms of watching this, let's see what he's doing for Enter Sandman. They might have lowered the key too. I don't know. Let's back up. So he's already backing off a little bit because that's difficult. Exit light is fucking hard to sing up here. I did not set this up on purpose, but guess what note that is? It is an F4. Exit. So singing E's are the hardest vowel to sing usually, or U, because they are restricting the throat and pulling the larynx up and using the jaw. E, exit, light, enter, night is all this. So distorting and keeping open and everything can be difficult. Now we're here with James here. He's not distorting the whole way through it. He's got some distortion, but he's also just staying clean and more open. So still awesome. I know this isn't as much of a clip here to look at, but sleep with one eye open. There it is. Something like that, which is the whole way up here to a G sharp. Grip it, and it's still, again, gripping your pillow tight. One of the things I want you to pay attention to here, if I back up again, is the fact that everybody thinks that they need to be fucking loud and everything's loud and we need to be loud and I need to be louder into the mic and you need to fucking, it's just a constant battle, especially in a rehearsal space. And it still fucking happens to me. I have in-ears and stuff, but if I am not using them or I'm doing something else or whatever, it's amazing how quick vulnerability sets in and you start pushing a little bit more, start pulling a little bit more, that chest voice, start belting a little bit more, and it just sucks. It just ruins everything. The more you can literally be monitored the correct way and use a softer voice, the more you can have subtlety and use volume to your benefit at certain places instead of just blasting everything out of your head. And it's, you know, I have to perform 3 hours tonight and there'll be songs that are a little bit lower in my range. And then somebody will come on and be like, we can't hear you right now. And it's fucking like, look, I got my voice compressed. Like, how much more can I do? So then anyway, the point is that you can actually tell he's backing off a little bit here and keeping himself corrected, and instead of having to go too loud. And once again, he just told the audience to sing, even though we're only 14 minutes into the set, maybe not because he's tired, because the shit's difficult and it's not worth blowing his voice out or using a little bit too much muscle to get there. Sandman, he comes. So he's not going any louder or harder than that. To the Sandman, he comes. But when you hear it, you're like, oh, this is awesome. All right, here, just in a matter of keeping this shorter. Last one we're going to go to is Chris Cornell here, and he was singing with Soundgarden in 2012. I think I saw this clip recently, and his voice was blown out. So there's a reason I wanted to pull that up. What you hear and what I hear might sound different, and you might be like, oh yeah, he sounds like he's screaming or distorted or whatever. No, he actually blew up his falsetto, and it happened to Chris quite often. I would hear in the shows, and I'd be like, oh man, that sucks. And he would, do what he could to get by, or sometimes he would just keep getting into that pocket and just adding these screams, but they sounded blood curdling and rough because they were. So here's doing Spoon Man. Let's check this out. Here we can tell that he's trying to stay down in chest, save me. And he's really starting to use some of this stuff because he's right at his bridge, which is F4 and F sharp 4. Spoon Man. So you heard it cracking in there a couple times. Basically, the reason I wanted to bring this one up was because this dude, obviously one of the best voices in rock music, but there was definitely times where his voice was blown out or it was a little bit too strained or whatever. And that goes to show about the volume thing again. And it goes to show about if you put too much muscle into the wrong area when you're warming up or when you're starting out, those muscles will acclimate and then it's hard. They anchor you, which I talk about a lot, but they anchor you to a certain place in your neck. Then when you go above, it might start pulling you back down and then you start projecting from that area, especially when you're playing loud and all you hear is your voice coming through a mic. So if you kind of go up behind the soft palate, like this, it's actually going to get quieter and it's going to change and you're not going to hear yourself the same. So a lot of times it can be difficult and you'll just start going, Spoon Man! It's just pushing everything out of the face and out of the mouth. Anyway, it happened to him quite often. Let's keep going. Instead of Sunday, which is a high C, Sunday, Sunday, he's just literally just screaming. And it still sounds pretty badass, but like I said, there was a reason I wanted to bring this up. So let's back up a tad, see what he can do in the first part. There you got a little bit more note. But we're up at a D5 there. Sky! So in terms of adding distortion like that, or, there's definitely an important thing about learning how to mix and learning how to correct your larynx, nasality, everything like that. The thing about Chris, I've made plenty of videos talking about this stuff, was that a lot of times he did have heady sound in his upper, tier up here, but he used to pull a lot of chest down all the time, and it just always sounded really weighty and really heavy and badass. Again, that can get you into trouble in certain settings, live settings, because you gotta fucking do that for God knows how long they played, an hour and 53 minutes. That is a long show to be, with all the kind of music that they had, to be pushing that much. And we're at 6 minutes and his voice is already fucked. It probably was fucked from another show. But anyway, one of the key things here is that try to learn how to keep your voice open. Spoon Man, like open, and then try to lean into it. But if you're leaning and just going for that grit, there's a chance that then against this anchor effect might happen, even if you're kind of in the right place. And then you kind of need it to make it work, or you need it to make your placement work for the note. And it's better to, same with Metallica there, to stay open and be able to hit these notes than to be fucked and just be able to, screaming like this. Anyway, I'll show you what that sounds like again. If I go, that's a C to a high C, way, above my bridge. If I try to find this upper nasal, kind of almost like Billy Corgan sound, that weed whackery sound, down here, out of placement, good. There I'm able to add it on. But again, if I'm singing words and have to keep doing that, it's going to get a little taxing, going to get a little tiring, because it's kind of like the vocal weightlifting thing. So I hope some of this shined light on certain things for you. I hope some of it helped. If you want to take lessons with me, again, you can go to sterlingrjackson.com. You can book right through the website. I'm on Patreon, always teaching more things over there, and trying to give those people that support me more and more extra things. So thank you for joining me. I hope to see you again soon.